Greetings and welcome to another Grenfell MediaWatch update. Today's edition I want to call Fire and Ice. And yes, it's totally unimaginative, but hey, the snow's gone and I can't think of anything else. Now, where do we start? Now, we know that out of the 300 properties that have been found to have flammable cladding, only 7 have actually had the cladding removed. Now, the government's response has been quite cold. Sajid Javid has made it clear that, look, we're watching the outcome of the tribunal in Croydon, which has been settled, in case you don't know, against the residents. And he's saying that, look, if any council wants to make a change to their cladding, then the government's really prepared to offer financial flexibility. This isn't the same thing as funding. Essentially, what they're saying is that they will enable the councils to borrow as much money as they need, put themselves as much debt as possible, but they ain't paying for it. Now, residents are rightly saying that this is pretty much like living in a ticking time bomb. And we're now seeing media articles where councils are refusing to list the properties that are at risk because they're saying that there's a fear of them being attacked by arsonists or terrorists. But one of the more interesting developments has actually come from the police of all sources. Now, we thought they were busy investigating those who are responsible for the fire in the first place. But what they've now shown is that they've done some tests on the fire doors that were installed at Grenfell. And they've discovered, which is quite useful, I suppose, that instead of the 13 minutes fire resistance that they're supposed to have, some of them were only resistant for 15 minutes. But of course, sadly, the media's still up to its usual tricks, using that term Grenfell fraudster for someone who's been posing a survivor and actually committing fraud, taking funds and finances by pretending that one of their family members, I think it was their husband, had passed away. And of course, we are all saddened and sickened by these kind of activities. But when the media uses the term Grenfell fraudster, it's again continuing that drip feeding of criminality and linking it to the survivors. That's not right. In fact, there are other ways the media can be useful if it's really sincere about being so. I know the History Channel is working on a series of documentaries about disasters that changed Britain, and Grenfell apparently is going to be one of the episodes. Now, the host, James Nesbitt, makes a really interesting point that when these things happen, the government, the powers that be, always point suspicion downstairs, down below. They never point it upstairs at themselves or look in the mirror. But thankfully, not all media channels are the same. And the WSHH channel gave activist Joe Delaney a platform to actually fight back, and fight back strong with integrity against the witch hunt that's been orchestrated against him by the right-wing media. No, they're not going to shut him up. But last week also demonstrated the ability of the media to actually put a human interest on stories. And I, for one, was heartbroken watching the piece by, I think it was Sky News, on the firefighters who are struggling with post-traumatic stress syndrome, about not being able to save everybody on that day. And whilst I'm talking about PTSD, I'd like to mention there was no media coverage of what the residents and the walkways had to suffer. Now, the walkways is the space that's underneath Grenfell, and they had a temporary boiler there, and it basically ran out of fuel. Pipes cracked, and we had people living there with no hot water. They had no heating during one of the coldest springs I've ever experienced. Now, once again, the council will know where to be seen. And what happened, even though it was eventually fixed, in that vacuum, in that void, you'd have thought lessons had been learned, but no. It was a local community that came out, that provided blankets, hot drinks, and basically kept everything going until the problem was rectified. And talking about no mainstream media coverage, where are the news reports on the Grenfell family that were offered a 6th-floor flat in Kensington Row, one of these so-called luxury flats, only to find out, and this is a resident with children, that the balcony was completely unsafe. I mean, we hear much stories in the media about how the Grenfell community are cherry-picking the offers that have been given to them. Would you take a balcony flat with unsafe ratings like that for your children? Because I wouldn't. Anyway, I want to close with a message that change is coming. Just as the sun has decided to make an appearance, spring is here. The snow has melted, even though it's still cold. So nationally, we're seeing Scotland have decided to strengthen their fire safety laws. And I say fire safety laws, I'm talking about they're going to put or ensure that all properties have smoke alarms inside them. What else? Northern Ireland, we've been told, has joined the silent walk on the 14th of every month. So the movement's no longer just a local issue, but it's continuing to grow on a national level, and hopefully will be an international movement until justice is served and residents all across the UK and hopefully all across the world recognise they have a right to live in safe spaces. And finally, the government has decided to give a date for its debate. It's around 2 months from now. Not ideal, the 14th of May. Gives them lots of time to get up to tricks behind the scenes to paint themselves in the best possible light. But we'll see what happens. And I'm going to sign off as usual. And I'm going to say, may the ancestors continue to guide and protect us. Ashe.